Okay, so in our previous segment, we talked about the brittle structures. So what's going to happen when rocks break? So now we want to talk about the ductile structures, or the plastic structures, in which the rocks are going to be bent. So the first case is going to be called a monocline, and you can see that it's going to make kind of like a stair step. So it goes up like this. So that's going to be called a monocline. And the next kind is going to be anticlines and synclines. So an anticline is going to be where the rocks are going to be doing this. So notice it kind of makes an A. So A for anticline. Okay, then you got places where the rocks are bending down like that. So that's going to be a syncline when it does that. So you got to know the difference between the anticline and a syncline. And then from the air, you should be able to figure out whether it's an anticline or a syncline by looking at the ages of the rocks. So let's say, for example, that erosion comes along like this, and it removes all of these rocks. What's it going to look like from the air? So from the sideways view, it's very easy to see that it's an anticline. The question is, what would it look like from the top-down view? So from the top-down view, it's going to look like a series of stripes, like this. So how could you tell that this one is an anticline and not a syncline? Because if, let's say, erosion comes along, this thing is also going to have stripes. So how can you tell the difference between the two? Look for the ages of the rocks. So the oldest rocks would be here. So the oldest rocks would be here, and then the youngest rocks would be the ones that are on top, so they're going to be over here. So the oldest rocks are going to be in the center of the anticline. The youngest rocks are going to be on the edges. But look at what happens here. So in the case of the syncline, the oldest rocks, which are down here, are on the edges. So here's your oldest rocks, and then the youngest rocks are in the middle. So it's the exact opposite. So make sure and know that for the exam. You could also have a situation in which an anticline or a syncline is tilted. So in the same way that we had horizontal beds and they could be tilted, so can an anticline and a syncline. So notice that instead of making stripes like it did before, it kind of makes a pattern that is kind of S-shaped, like this. And when it does tilt, we refer to the anticline or the syncline as plunging. And so there is an axis of plunge that those anticlines and synclines are going down into the earth. Okay, so that you have an axis of the fold there, and then that axis is plunging into the earth. Okay, the third kind is going to be domes and basins. So you can think of a dome as being a three-dimensional anticline, and then a basin is a three-dimensional syncline. Because look at that dome from the sideways view. So from the sideways view, on one side of it, you can see that the rocks are doing this. Okay, but if you are also to look at the rocks over here on this side, you would see that they're doing the same thing. So it's kind of like a anticline, but it's in three dimensions. And then the basin, when you look at it from the side view, is going to look like this, but it's also going to look at it the same view from the other side as well. So it's going to be looking like that. Now you can tell whether it's an anticline or whether it's a dome or whether it's a basin, again, by looking at where are the youngest rocks located at and where are the oldest. It's the same for here. So this was the anticline. The oldest rocks were in the middle. The youngest were on the outside. So if you have a dome, it's the same thing. The oldest rocks will be in the middle. The youngest rocks will be on the outside. Over here, this one was the syncline. This one here was the basin. It's the same thing. Youngest rocks in the middle, oldest rocks on the outside of it. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about how do mountain belts form.